Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2021. This is a 5-month mission I'm embarked on with a bunch of other booktubers where we're reading Star Trek fiction for the rest of the year. We started in August with the original series. We're going by air date rather than by in-continuity chronology. So we went next to Next Generation. And for the month of October, we're doing Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Which I've talked quite a bit about on this channel, and then I stopped for a while because it seemed like I was drowning you in Star Trek videos. And then I had a bit of an interruption in my routine here at Hyde Cottage. But both those factors have allayed just a bit, and I'm ready to start drowning you in Star Trek videos again. And we've talked about Deep Space Nine mainly as a weird exception to the typical Star Trek formula. Deep Space Nine, as you would tell from the title, is about a space station that was built and operated by the Cardassians, reptilian-like, aggressive enemy species to the Federation. And then when treaty disputes were finally resolved, the Federation took it over and renamed it. The Cardassians called it Terrak Nor. The Federation, rather than build their own space station, they took over this one, I guess, cleaned it up as much as they could for booby traps and renamed it Deep Space Nine. Although it occurs throughout the series that problems crop up because a lot of the technology on Deep Space Nine is not compatible with Starfleet technology. It's Cardassian-based. That's pretty interesting, and Deep Space Nine is not just any space station. It orbits the planet Bajor, which was the scene of brutal Cardassian occupation for a long, long time, stripping the planet of its natural resources, destroying a lot of what was beautiful about it, crushing its people, stealing religious artifacts, including a number of supernatural orbs that the Bajorans thought were gifts from the prophets. And the prophets didn't live in some nebulous heaven for the Bajorans. They lived in the gigantic stable wormhole that exists just outside the orbit of Bajor, and that opens out on the Gamma Quadrant, dozens, tens of thousands of light years away. It's a stable, gigantic, old wormhole, virtually unknown in all of the Alpha Quadrant, and of immense strategic value, as you might expect for Deep Space Nine, for the Federation, for the Cardassians. The Bajorans think that the prophets live in the wormhole. And they aren't completely wrong. There is some sort of alien that lives in the wormhole. The Federation refers to them as wormhole aliens. They don't refer to them as gods. But the picture is complicated more because the Starfleet commander who is sent to Deep Space Nine to take control of it, Benjamin Sisko, is viewed by the Bajorans as the prophet, as an emissary of the prophet. He's viewed as a religious figure. That complicates his role with both the Cardassians and the Federation in ways that I don't think was ever fully exploited in the show. Although it does play an important part in the ending of Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine was a Star Trek show that was very conscious of bringing its own story to an ending. That did not happen in the original show, of course, and it largely didn't happen in The Next Generation either. Every Next Generation fan loves the episode All Good Things, which does bring the series to a close, but it doesn't bring any storyline to a close, except for the most important storyline of all on one level in The Next Generation, which is the one that I did not see at all. Book Trek opened my eyes to the one major plot line in The Next Generation that is resolved in All Good Things, which is the humanization of Jean-Luc Picard. The fact that the growth of Jean-Luc Picard is finally consummated at the end, the final scene of All Good Things. That I like, but the Enterprise is still having adventures. The crew is still going about their business. But whereas Deep Space Nine was very different. Deep Space Nine, you felt almost certainly from Season 4, you felt that the writers were going to bring this storyline to an end. A real end. And they did. Deep Space Nine has more of a definitive ending than any other Star Trek incarnation. One can always hope that will be changed. One can always hope that Star Trek Discovery, rightly referred to as STD by the millions and millions of former Star Trek fans who hate its guts, will have an absolutely ironclad ending. And like so many other Star Trek fans, I join those people in hoping that that ending will be that literally everybody dies, preferably in agony. Uh, and that we all just forget that Star Trek Discovery ever happened. That would be nice if we could just forget that that whole thing ever happened. But we'll get to that with Book Trek 2022. For 2021, I don't want to spoil things with Deep Space Nine here, but I'm assuming that anybody who's watching these Star Trek videos has seen the whole of the show. I'll try not to spoil things specifically, but let's just say in general, not only does Benjamin Sisko's role as the emissary come to an end at the end in the final episode of Deep Space Nine, and not because of any threat from the wormhole, but from a supernatural threat based on Bajor. But also the storyline comes to an end. This great window, this fantastic group of characters, heroes, warriors, almost friends by the end, largely breaks up. Huge key elements of that group are either fundamentally changed or gone by the end of the show. So that unlike all other Star Trek, where you can, most other Star, certainly the original series and the Next Generation, you can imagine episodes after the final episode on TV. We'll get to Voyager next month. Voyager, of course, invites that kind of speculation, but no longer with the formula that lasted for the whole of the show's run. Voyager also had a very natural final episode, a final episode that fans were waiting for a long time. But we'll get to that next month. I love Voyager. We'll be talking a lot about Voyager. But with Deep Space Nine, that presents a problem. For writers of novels, that presents a problem because it feels utterly pointless to write a novel set in the first 3 seasons of Deep Space Nine. Why would you bother to do that? Maybe you could do that with the Next Generation and have a little fun, but with Deep Space Nine had a story plot that was continuing episode by episode for years. And it was the first Star Trek that really did that. And that makes novels really difficult to do. It's halfway through the run on Deep Space Nine that suddenly that wormhole becomes the nexus of a war. Those of us who were thinking along those terms at the very beginning were thinking, well, okay, trade and commerce is going through that wormhole, but what if an invading species came through that wormhole? Something really bad, maybe as bad as the Borg. Well, what would happen then? And of course, the showrunners eventually got to that hypothetical, and Deep Space Nine was embroiled in the Dominion War. An enemy called the Dominion did come through that wormhole, tentatively at first, and then to conquer the whole of the Alpha Quadrant, which means not only the Federation, but the Romulans, the Cardassians, the Klingons, everybody. Eventually, in the Dominion War, everybody has to band together against the Dominion in order to save the whole of the Alpha Quadrant, which changes Federation history enormously, and it chronicles the history of Deep Space Nine. There's no way for you to write a really good story set anywhere in the settled incarnation of the show. You could write an episode, you could write a story set in the pre-Dominion War Deep Space Nine, I guess, when Jake Sisko, the son of Benjamin Sisko, is still a little boy, when all the characters are sort of frozen in place from those earlier episodes. But it would be very unsatisfying because we've watched those characters grow and evolve through war. And there's no way that you can write a story set in that war because those stories have already been written. It would be a minefield of continuity. So what you're left with is writing Deep Space Nine stories after the series. And that's incredibly tough to do because a lot of major characters are gone. And a lot of what remains is wide open. It's wide open territory. So you'd be breaking that ground on your own. And I guess that is the appeal, because a lot of writers did that, including S.D. Perry, the author of the book we're looking at today. This is Avatar, book 1 of 2. The main character there is Colonel Kira Nerys. She's a Bajoran, and she was the first officer of Benjamin Sisko on Deep Space Nine. Benjamin Sisko is not around for this book. She is in charge of Deep Space Nine. And you see Jean-Luc Picard on there as well because, of course, the Dominion War involved the Enterprise. Not directly. We don't ever see it. We don't ever see it directly in Deep Space Nine. The action is too heavily concentrated on Deep Space Nine and the Klingons and the Cardassians and the Dominion itself. But nevertheless, we know the Enterprise is out there fighting the war. And this takes place after the final episode of Deep Space Nine, when there are new threats, there are new perils, but when the Dominion is not one of them. And it introduces, it shifts the action a bit to the Enterprise. It introduces an old Enterprise character, Ro Laren, who is also a Bajoran woman, very similar to Kira Nerys. I'd be willing to bet that the initial show notes for Deep Space Nine had the Kira Nerys character be Ro Laren, and maybe the actress wasn't available, or at the last minute they decided to make a different character. They are very, very similar characters. That's a leaf blower you hear in the background, but I'm not objecting because the leaf blower can't continue. The construction is almost over across the street, so those noises are not going to be bothering me much longer. I doubt any longer than this week. So what I'm trying to say is this book and all other Deep Space Nine novels that take place that move the action to after the show have a completely uphill battle. Why would you even be interested? If it's not hallowed by continuity, why would you even be interested? And if it doesn't have a lot of your favorite characters, why would you even be interested? It puts a heavy burden on the writer. And S.D. Perry doesn't really carry that burden here. This is part 1 of 2. It very much reads like part 1 of 2. It ends practically in mid-scene. So that it would be worthless for you to read this book on its own. You really have to read both Avatar books on its own. And I have no intention of doing that. I'm not going to read the second one. This one wasn't satisfying enough. And it continues the curse of Terok Noir, I'm afraid to say. Because although I have not been making Deep Space Nine videos this last week, I have been reading Deep Space Nine books. At least one every night. And they have been terrible. Absolutely terrible. Either very poorly done, or competently done, but in very much in the continuum of who cares, who gives a crap, and that has thrown me back on theorizing, and I have had to theorize on why that is, and that is the theory that I've been talking about in this video, which is that it's virtually impossible to write a good Deep Space Nine novel. Novels take place chapter by chapter. They build slow incremental tension. They have large plot lines set against smaller personal plot lines. And in Deep Space Nine, that was done on the screen. Not true in Star Trek The Next Generation, not true in the original series, but in Deep Space Nine, that was done on the screen after about the 3rd or 4th season. And that renders the novels obsolete in a way I did not anticipate, but I think that is the theory I'm going to use to explain why those novels are all so bad. There's got to be, it can't just be the show. The show is full of interesting characters. So I'm going to soldier on. I'm not going to read part 2 of Avatar, but I am going to soldier on and keep reading Deep Space Nine novels for the rest of October. But good Lord, if ever there was a franchise whose novels were cursed, it's this one. Now, I might be singing a different tune in Book Trek 2022. I might be singing a different tune. Book Trek 2022 doesn't, right at this moment, have much to work with. The new show about Captain Pike and Number One and Lieutenant Spock, that might change things completely. I sincerely hope that it does. It would be great to have fans have been writing and hoping for the adventures of Captain Pike on the Enterprise for 50 years. It would be great to get that. Absolutely great. Provided they don't ruin it. And given how badly far left SJW progressive ideologic politics has infiltrated pop culture, it's entirely likely that they will ruin it. You've all seen the rumors that were brooded around that the young Jim Kirk in what's it called, Brave New Worlds? That the young Jim Kirk in that series will be bisexual. That is ridiculous. That is completely against canon. That does not make you a bigot to say that. That is completely ridiculous. It is meant to enrage a certain section of the neck-bearded fan base. That's the only reason that the showrunners would even contemplate doing that. It's meant to enrage a certain part of the fan base. I'm old enough to remember, as the Twitter saying goes, when it was the number one thing you didn't want to do was antagonize your fan base. If Brave New Worlds can resist those urges, I certainly don't see why they couldn't. Those urges have led to financial disaster for every pop culture franchise that has embraced them. There hasn't been an exception. In every single case, it has been financial disaster. No different for Star Trek. Star Trek Discovery is in a hothouse protected little bubble so that it doesn't have to prove or show its ratings. Put it on rated TV, and it does so poorly that reruns of dog shows beat it. Star Trek. Because fans absolutely hate it. That's why. Because fans absolutely hate it, and it is so tired. In 2021, going on 2022, it is so tired to just reflexively say what the stars and the showrunners of these things say, which is that the reason fans hate it is because they're all bigots. That is just so tired. It isn't true. It was never true. It's just that the product is bad. And the product is bad because you were writing it to make political points rather than good entertainment. If the new Star Trek Strange New Worlds can avoid that, it might give a whole shot in the arm to the Star Trek franchise. That would be great. Absolutely great. I would love that. I know there are smart people involved with the Kurtzman era Star Trek. I know they are. There was a lot of, I might not agree with a lot of the philosophy in Star Trek Picard, but there was a lot of beautifully done stuff in that show. It was not contemptible. Or it wouldn't have survived the experience, the Pon farr, the Kunat Kalifi, of having two old seasoned Star Trek fans watching it with a critical eye. Mark Richardson and I watched Star Trek Picard together for the first time with no prep, and we both liked it. We both had our issues with some things, but we both liked it. We were Star Trek fans who wanted to like it, but were still going to be critical about it. Mark, I'm sure, has gotten about as much, or maybe more, enjoyment out of some of the early novels of Tom Clancy, for instance, as I have. In that sense, I think Clancy, his political opinions and a lot of the stuff that he brought into his novels was deplorable. But there's no denying the entertainment value of some of those things, and also some of their pop culture renditions. Jack Ryan on the big screen has been almost universally enjoyable. So Mark and I were predisposed to go into the Jack Ryan with John Krasinski on cable favorably. And we ended up ripping it to shreds because it wasn't done well. We would have done the same thing, Star Trek Picard, if it weren't done well. But it was. I might disagree with some of the angles of it, but it was done well. And also, Mark showed me Star Trek Short Treks, I think is what they're called. There was one where Number One and Lieutenant Spock are trapped in a turbo lift and have to just talk to each other. I thought it was incredibly good. And there's one about tribbles. There's one about Star Trek and the Starfleet encountering tribbles for the first time that not only was extremely well done, but was absolutely hilarious. Now, the neck-bearded fan base that I'm talking about, I'm not defending them. They hated both of those short treks for utterly atavistic, sexist, and misogynistic reasons. They didn't see the value in it at all. But nevertheless, they were full of value, and anybody that can do that can put together a really good Star Trek show. So we will see. But how did they get on this digression? Oh, yeah. I was saying way back 15 minutes ago when this rant started, I was saying I don't see how you could write a really satisfying Deep Space Nine novel. Unless you were to do the novel I would like to write myself, which is Jake Sisko, the boy who grew up to be a journalist and a writer. It's absolutely natural to write a gigantic novel about the whole story of Deep Space Nine, written by Jake Sisko. That is absolutely natural to me, and yet it's never been done, as far as I know. But instead, you're going to get little stuff like this. Let's continue the story. What would happen? These what if adventures, and these what if adventures are poison on their own because every writer who ventures out into the unknown like this invents a ship, invents some crew members. The next writer who writes a book set in the future of Deep Space Nine after the final episode feels like they have to build on those earlier books by other authors. The end result of that, as I mentioned already with The Next Generation, the end result of that is that you're writing extremely exclusive, members-only fan fiction. Only you're doing it for pocketbooks with a big budget. I've read some Next Generation novels. I've read some Deep Space Nine novels in this month that were incomprehensible because they were entirely based on the last 30 novels that were written by other authors. I shouldn't need to know that in order to like these books. So I have all but lost hope that I'm going to read any good Deep Space Nine, but I'm going to try. I'm going to keep trying. I don't think I'm going to read any more Deep Space Nine novels set after the end of the show. even though the novels set in the run of the show seem a little pro forma to me, I'm probably going to stick with them from now on rather than read any of what I can't help but think of as fan fiction. So I'll try that. I might not make a video every day for the rest of October because it gets a little bit depressing to come on here and say this stank, this was terrible. One complete upside here is that I've been watching a lot of Deep Space Nine, rewatching a lot of Deep Space Nine, as sort of a running companion to reading Deep Space Nine, and that has been a tremendous joy, just a tremendous joy. And I am greatly looking forward to doing that with Voyager because Star Trek Voyager really holds a place for me. So, but anyway, we're going to do Deep Space Nine for the rest of the month. So I just want to let you know I'm back in the saddle here. This was not good. The sequel, I'm sure, would not be good because it starts in the middle of a paragraph. But I will move on, and we will see what we encounter tomorrow. So I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.